right. Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Ray Weiss from the Printing United Alliance. So if you could maybe introduce yourself and what you do for Printing United and, of course, who they are.
Okay, yes, perfect. So, yeah, Ray Weiss, I'm the Vice President of eLearning and Certifications for Printing United Alliance. And so, Printing United Alliance is an association here in the States. We call it a trade association of printers and printer manufacturers. And so, we represent printers, and that's our goal is to try to support and help printers wherever we can. And so my focus is our online learning platform. I do a little bit of in-person training, though I don't do the training. It's for our installer community, but there's an online component for them as well. We discovered, well, certainly we didn't discover it. I used to do only in-person training, and it was starting to get harder to get people to travel. But COVID certainly said, well, we're changing everybody's business model. And so we launched our platform in 2022.
So you
Yes, sir.
say printers, I'm going to assume that is printing across the board from sort of business cards all the way up to big banners and posters.
That's correct, including T-shirts and packaging. Just it goes on and on. It seems like, every now and then someone will tell me, well, why are you in printing? That's not that big an industry. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Here's my shirt. This banner is real behind me.
Well, look, we're going to focus in, if we can, on a particular point of the print industry that people kind of forget about, but it's almost the most important thing in some ways. We're going to talk about colour and colour management. Perhaps we could start, if you could explain what we mean by colour management and why it's important.
Well, so Jack, really, none of us print in just black and white. I mean, maybe a forms printer, but other than that, everybody's applying color to a substrate, whether it's a shirt, whether it's a piece of metal, whether it's a vinyl banner, we're all applying color. And so, I think of color management, right, is how do we manage it? What's going on in the background to make sure that when I want a red or a blue to print, that it prints the same across all different substrates. And I also should be able to view it on my screen, which I know a lot of people are skeptical about, but you can dial it in so that what you see is very close to what you actually print. And in our industry, it's everything, right? I mean, everybody's printing color. It's fundamental, I say.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading some of your information, and it's described as a minefield. So, I mean, what are the consequences financially and for reputation of maybe getting colour wrong in a print job?
Sure. So, look, I can tell a quick story, and I promise it'll be fast, but I used to get people would call in to ask for referrals. So they'd want a referral to a printer. And one of the call-ins was because the printer in their town could not print these sound panels a consistent color. And so the manufacturer would always order a few extra, but what happens when they needed a few extra beyond the few extra? I mean, they have I don't know, it was 10 or 12% overage that they always ordered because, panels will break and someone will mess one up when they go to install it. But when you get beyond that 10 or 15%, you have to order more. The printer in their town could never get the color right. And so it was always, oh, no, I reject it, go back and do more. I reject it, go back and do more. But then he discovered there was a printer in town who could get the color right, but they were so busy that they couldn't do his work. I think that correlates because they were getting the color right, and people start to discover that. Most people don't want to tell you that you've done a bad job. I mean, certainly not to your face. They'll say it online, they'll say it on review platforms, but usually the way you'll know that you've done a bad job is they leave. And so they're gone, right? And that doesn't even get into the whole, so the printer, your production person prints out a banner and the pre-press person goes, wait a minute, or the salesperson says, that's the wrong color. Well, now you're throwing that banner away, you're going back on press and having to reprint it. And by the way, you're trying to figure out, well, how do I adjust that? And so they start using words like it's too warm or it's too cool or it's not quite the right, they use all these not scientific terms to get to really the heart of the issue. And so they do those reprints over and over again, which is costing time and money. I was at a shop up in Toronto seeing they had an onset, so really big, fast, wide format printer, printing board after board. It takes 6 seconds to print a board. They had those jobs timed perfectly, and they had them busy all day. Well, if you had to come back and say, well, I've got to slide in this job because we got the color wrong, well, now you've thrown your whole schedule off, right? And so suddenly you're not meeting some deadline, and maybe the customer says, I'm done, you're not meeting my deadlines. And then the other one is for brands. I was in a movie theater once and I love Milk Duds. And I walked over to buy the Milk Duds. And the variance in color, I just thought, whoa. And it made me think, and I know color, is there something wrong with those Milk Duds? When I realized, of course, it's not. It's probably just they messed up their color. They went to a different printer. It was a different lot, a different run, and somebody didn't check it. But it got out there. And so now the consumer, that was me in this case, says, is there a problem with the product? And that can be devastating for a company.
Could you explain how Printing United Alliance is helping the industry with this?
Well, so we do a lot of training. We have some basic training. I call it just make sure everybody's talking about color the same way. We have a course called How to Evaluate and Communicate Color. So that, Jack, you and I are sitting here, and if I pointed to something like, I can't quite hit it, this blue, and said, is that the blue you want? And you go, no, it's not quite purple enough, or it's not quite, there's not enough magenta in it. And we could go around and around all day to get that right. And so that course teaches everybody how to evaluate and communicate color all the same way, right? They're all using the same language, is the way I call it, or I refer to it. Then we also have color management courses. We started off with fundamentals, which is really just foundational color management knowledge. But then because, as we talked about, direct to garment, flexo, offset, they all have little nuances. And so after that fundamentals, we then go to the different market segments and we have color management for them. So what are the issues that a flexo operator needs to be concerned about that an offset operator doesn't need to be concerned about, right? So that we're all printing the same on the same. And they all have little nuances or differences, and you need to be aware of them so that you can do that. So we have those certifications. We have, of course, our G7, but I think we're going to talk about that in a minute. So I'll hold off on that. But so we try to provide training so that people in an industry can understand the importance of color and become confident. Confidence is everything. If I'm not confident in what I'm doing and I'm just guessing, and so somebody says, an example I use is, so a new print buyer, their boss says, I want this to be within 2 delta E. And they go, okay. So they go to the printer and they say, I want this to be within 2 delta E. And the printer goes, okay. And now we're all chasing our tails. But the question I say first is, what standard? Is it delta E 76? Is it 1994? Is it 2000? Because if we're not in the same ballpark, I could get it within 2 delta E, but you could still not be happy.
So is it about training people to sort of ask the right questions, make sure they get the right input from their customers and have files in the correct format? I mean, there's a lot there, isn't there?
Absolutely. It really is. Even so, look, I'm not here to talk bad about Adobe because I think Adobe makes great products, but their creative suite, the color space that people are designing in, their default is web offset for CMYK and is sRGB for RGB. So, we could have a whole conversation about, do I design in RGB or CMYK? Forget that. Let's just make sure that we're using as much color as possible. I call that killing color, right? If you start off, if you design your job, and let's say you've said CMYK and you're doing it in swap, web offset, you're using a small color space when your device can print a larger color space, which means a larger field of colors to choose from. So you're limiting your output right from the get-go. And even if you're not the creator and it's your customer, think about how beneficial you are to them when you say, you know what, we could print more color than what you're sending, and I'm happy to keep doing what you're sending, but if you'd like to get more vibrant colors, we can do that.
Okay, so you touched on G7 Plus. I guess that's something new that you've announced. Could you tell us what that is and the benefits of that for people?
So it's really an update. I think of it as a software update, right? Because people get that. You start off, if you've been in the industry for a while, I started off with Onyx, I think 7, and it's up to Onyx 25 now. And if I were still using Onyx 7, I would probably not, if it would even run, I would probably not be very smart because they've improved it. They've made advancements. And that's what G7 Plus has done. It's kept the core of G7, and I use that to say that, Grackle, for instance, if you're printing in the Grackle color space, which is the CMYK color space, your colors are not going to really significantly change. But when you start printing in larger color spaces or in other color spaces, you're still going to maintain that consistent neutrality, which, Jack, I'm sure you know this, or if you don't, it's good to know that people will see the difference in gray before almost any other color. It quickly jumps out at you. And that's really what G7 is all about, is getting the grays correct. And what they've done is they've enhanced it to print on more technologies, because when it came out, really it was for commercial offset. People found that it worked on some of these other technologies, and maybe they had to, do some tweaking to get it to work, but they could make it work. And so the inventor of the G7 said, wait a minute, we need to refine this, adjust it, enhance it so that it worked better across all different printing technologies. And so that's really what G7 Plus is.
I mean, I think overall it seems like this is aimed at people that are sort of fairly experienced printers, designers, to be able to, it speaks their language. I guess also part of your sort of broader training goes to people that maybe aren't so technically aware, but are also involved in the process, whether in either sales or production or some sort of position. Do you have specific training for everyone in the workflow?
We do, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because our color management professional certification not only covers all the different segments, but there's one for creative, there's one for sales, because I was in sales for a number of years, and one place that I worked, I sold wide format printers. They made all the salespeople understand how they worked, mechanically. And so I could fix a printer, which meant that I understood its limitations. I understood what it could and couldn't do, so that I wouldn't oversell it, right? And so then you have an unhappy customer. So if I'm a salesperson talking about color and I say, oh yeah, we can hit that really vibrant purple, and the production guy's going, or gal is saying, no, we can't. Well, now as a sales guy, I've messed up because I've told my customer I can do it. Now I've got to go back to them and say, you know what? I got a little ahead of myself. We really can hit that color. We can get close, and we're going to really work hard to get as close as we can, but we're not going to hit it exactly. And so you've got to be very careful about the language you use. Like, I've stricken the word match. You'll never get me to say I'm going to make these two colors match, because you won't. But our eyes are really good at making those minute adjustments, and they will look, as long as I get them similar and I'm on the right hue, my eye goes, oh yeah, those are the same colors.
Okay, and that's a skill in itself, I think. Okay, so this is a service you're providing to the whole industry. How can people get involved? What's the best way to get in touch?
All they have to do is go to our platform, eLearningplus.org. You don't have to be a member of the Alliance, though there is a benefit. If you're a member, you get a discount on courses, right? I mean, that's one of the benefits of membership. There's many others, so I'm not going to try to equivocate all of those, but there's many benefits to being a member, but one of them is a discount on courses. But you don't have to be a member, because let's say you're taking one course and it's we have one of our courses is screen printing basics for apparel. I think it's $39 for a member, and it's $49 or $59 for a non-member. And they're probably like, that delta's not big enough. I'm just going to take the course. And that's okay because it doesn't matter. They just go to that platform. We've done our best to kind of divide up to introductory, intermediate, advanced levels. And then up at the top, there's a place that you can actually go, I want to see certifications. You can go right to the certifications. There's lots of ways that you can get to where you want to go. There's even free resources for everyone. So I call those like standards. So if you want to download the Grackle Color Space, you can go to our site. You don't have to be a member, and it's free to everybody. We feel like as a trade organization for the printing industry, we should provide those resources at no cost. And that's why we do that.
And in terms of the end customers of the print, is this having your printer have this certification, is that recognized as something of value?
It is. There are, particularly the G7, so G7 and G7 Plus, mainly G7. G7 Plus is still coming along, right? We're getting ready to introduce system certifications and then soon the facility certifications. But there are many brands that when you get the RFP from them, it says they require you to be a G7 qualified facility. So if you're not, you're out of the running for that job because the brand understands if you're G7, they've got a better chance of you getting their color right and getting it right across different substrates, right, and processes. And that matters. Back to my milk dud analogy earlier.
Well, it's interesting you say milk duds because obviously we're based in the UK. We're a global publication, but most people watching this are probably going to be in the UK.
Right.
First of all, what's a milk dud?
So it's like a little chocolate candy. Yes. You get them at movie theaters.
Okay. Yeah. Still, yeah, fair enough. So is this, you're talking about the wrapping on that, presumably?
Well, they come in a box.
Oh, okay.
So they're not even wrapped individually. They're just in a box, in different size boxes. And so you go to a movie theater and you get a little box of milk duds, and they're a little snack that you pop in your mouth. That my dentist would say, stop eating those. And I've stopped eating them. That's from years ago. I don't even eat milk duds any longer because my dentist and I'm sure my doctor would like to say, stop it.
Stop it. Well, Maltesers are my cinema sweet of choice. But the question I was going to ask was, for UK, I mean, obviously UK people can access the training.
Yes.
Is there anything that's sort of different across different countries?
Well, Jack, we spell color wrong. I did a class once in Australia, and I took my entire color management deck and searched everywhere to make sure color was spelled with a U. And I told them I have personalized, I've localized my deck to Australia. I can't do anything but the accent, but my deck is localized. So yeah, I mean, we have 60 countries that access our platform currently. So yeah, there's no limitation. We're working hard on languages. So we have Spanish version of our color management professional fundamentals. On our G7 Plus upgrade, we have Taiwanese, Mandarin. I'm working on Turkey right now, and then Spanish is next. So we're doing our best to localize them as we can. I had someone ask, well, when are you going to do it in French? I said, as soon as I get someone who can translate it. You know, it's one of the things that those localization services don't do well because printing is a technical topic, right? If I say I'm going to read a color, that's different than reading a book. And you have to have a different translation. Otherwise, it's wrong.
Well, that's fabulous. Thanks so much for your time, Ray. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And
thank you.
I look forward to hearing more in the future.
It's been a pleasant time speaking with you.